Hello and welcome to Story Untold. I'm Martin Bauman, and today I'm talking to two inspiring people. John Rathwell and Tracy Guenard are the folks behind Searching for Sero, Sero being short for serotonin. It's a mental wellness project that has the two traveling in a converted camper van across Canada and the United States, meeting people and sharing their stories of finding happiness. They started last spring and they've been on the road since May of 2016. More than mental wellness, though, it's a project about suicide prevention and an example of what happens when you lose someone close to you and start to think a little differently about how to live your life. Here's their story.
We just pulled into Fruita, Colorado. It's a small town, but I was like, it's big enough to have cell service. That's not a problem. And get into town, I'm like, we have one bar. And we kind of drove around town a little bit, and it's like, there's one bar all over town.
I guess that's part and parcel with living outside of a van. You kind of take chances when you go into a new town. You don't always know what you're going to get yourself into.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's super nice to have Wi-Fi at our campsite, and we can kind of just set up camp in the middle of the bush and work and do everything. But it's also sometimes really nice to not have it.
So I can see you right now. You're in your van that you've been living in for months now and will continue to live in. Can you describe what home looks like for you right now?
So we live and travel in a 1991 Volkswagen Westfalia. So it's a beautiful van. It's small. It's 15 feet long, but it's got all we need, really. It's got 2 beds. Actually, we could sleep 4 in here, even if it's a tight space. We have a sink, 2-burner stove. We have water, a little fridge, and on the roof, which we can pop actually and stand in if we pop the roof. On the roof, we have stand-up paddle boards. We have a big Thule box with a lot of gear if we want to go hiking or camping or doing things like that. In the back, we have our mountain bikes because we're 2 avid mountain bikers. And when we're on the coast, we like to carry surfboards as well. So we're really ready for adventure in our little van.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? You start with, the van's really small. We have this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
But no, for a little 15-foot van, it's actually surprisingly roomy. And there was definitely a giant call of what we were going to bring with us when we moved into the van. But I think we often surprise people with how much we do have with us.
Yeah.
Which is fun because we're traveling all the time. Sometimes we want our mountain bikes. In Fruita, it's one of the top up and coming mountain bike destinations in Colorado. But soon enough we'll be in Southern California and we're going to want our surfboards. So
Right.
Kind of carry everything because it's not like we can go back home between each town to get what we want or what we need. So
Are you opening the van doors and things are spilling out right now? You've got so much stuff in there, or how is it managed?
The van door is not bad. The interior space, we try to keep it as neat as possible because we have to live in that space on a daily basis. So that's why the Thule box is really important. So we have a lot of this on the outside. And of course, when we want to go on an adventure and we want to plan, then we say the van pukes. So we get everything out to take what we need and then pack everything up. So in a way, it feels like it takes a little longer to get ready just because we have to find everything, but everything has a place in the van and It fits really well.
We definitely noticed the cleaner and the more organized we keep the van, the easier life is.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the same for a house. If you always walk in and you got clutter everywhere, you're just going to kind of get frustrated. You're kind of wandering around and losing things. So we try to keep the van clean and organized, and we get that comment a lot when people walk by and they stop all the time and talk to us, and they're like, "You live in this? It's so clean. Where's all your stuff?" And it's just we spend a lot of time making sure it's organized and stuff's put away because it just is so much easier to live in a small space when things are organized.
What did life look like for each of you before embarking on this adventure of searching for Sero?
You want to start?
Yeah, maybe not that much different for myself. I spent 2 years living out of a Jeep Cherokee, before getting this van. So like in comparison, this is like a luxury condo. Like the Jeep was small. I had like one side with my little thermorest and sleeping bag, and the other side of the back was all like Tupperware bins where I'd keep like my clothes and my kitchen stuff, and that was about it. But yeah, the more recently though, I've been working as a professional photographer, and so there was a lot of office time. I worked from home from our condo in Gatineau, Quebec, and then when I was on assignment, it was often on the road, either flying to destinations or driving. There'd definitely be periods of times where I felt like I was never home. It was like going job to job. Like I had one job where I like literally flew back from Calgary into Ottawa, switched, like didn't even leave the airport, got like a new suitcase full of clean clothes and took off to Halifax. So it was like, it was fun life. It was exciting and it kept me busy, which is kind of the same as living in the van. We're always busy, but it wasn't, I guess for living in a vehicle and traveling a lot, it wasn't a big stretch for me. It wasn't like it was something I'd never done.
What about you, Tracy?
Yeah, for me, on the other hand, it was definitely new. As John was saying, we lived in Gatineau, so it's like on the Quebec side, but right beside Ottawa. So I was working in Ottawa for the federal government. I had been working there for a few years at that point. Had what most people call the golden ticket, permanent job with the feds, good salary, good pension, all of that. I had a condo in Gatineau. I was pretty well settled, but then I decided to let it all go and go for a life of adventure and something quite different. So let go of the condo, let go of the job, and just start living in a vehicle, which is something I had never done. I travel a lot, but in more conventional ways, like using my 2, 3, 4 weeks vacation a year to go abroad or visit friends. So that was definitely quite different for me.
A big driving force behind this for you. You're looking at mental wellness, how people find happiness, how people achieve mental wellness, and it's also very much geared towards suicide prevention, something that's touched both of you quite closely. Can you tell me how the events unfolded, which led to what you're embarking on and have been embarking on for the past many months?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of started with a phone call from my mother saying that Dad had passed away. Dad had killed himself, and I live about 4 hours away from my parents' house, and I just kind of got in the car and drove home. And on that drive, I was like 4 hours by myself. I'm like, did that phone call actually happen? Is that actually what my mom said? Like that whole time it was just like, no, it can't be. I talked to Dad like a week ago. It was one of the best conversations we've ever had. I don't know. We talked about cheese, which was, maybe doesn't sound that exciting to most people, but Dad was pretty quiet and pretty reserved, and really our only conversations ever were about cars and mechanics or hunting. So talking about cheese was like I remember hanging up the phone, but was like said to Tracy, like, I talked to my dad a half hour about cheese today. Like, things are good. But I mean, obviously they weren't, and I think that's something. When I share that story, a lot of people that have lost friends or family to suicide say that, like, the weeks coming into it, they thought they were, the best they had been. They were reaching out, they were talking, so it was interesting once I started kind of paralleling to friends and people we met about that story. But yeah, I guess after the funeral and after things kind of settled down a bit, I said to Tracy, I want to use photography, I want to use my art to help bring attention to suicide prevention. And I tossed that idea around for a while, kind of hung up on, like, how do you photograph suicide? And kind of during that time of figuring it out, Tracy ended up losing her aunt.
Yeah, it was a weird timing. I mean, neither John nor I had experienced suicide closely, and all of a sudden, it happened, back to back. So it was a rough time, not only emotionally, but I personally think that suicide is not like any kind of grief. You wonder about life in a very different way than you would if someone you love died from natural death. Like there's a lot of thinking associated with it, and not only do you question that person's life, but you question your own as well. And that's what we found ourselves doing. After all that, we were like, like why were these people so unhappy that they wanted to end their lives? And like when we look back even today, John's dad and my aunt were two completely different persons with symptoms of mental health that showed in very, very different way. Like John's dad was very reserved. My aunt wasn't all that much. We knew that she had been suffering from depression for years and years and battling depression. Yet she was in a phase in her life where she seemed the happiest and had the most thing to look forward to. Like she was a newly grandmother, and she was so happy about that. And like people thought that this was really good for her. She took a lot of pride in her grandchildren and all that. And yet she chose that time to end her life. So then you think, wow, like, why is it, and what can I do to make my life the happiest I can? Am I making my life the happiest I can make it? Am I making the right choices? Like I was there sitting thinking, I'm turning 30 years old. Is this the life I envision myself doing? And am I enjoying it as much as I can? And when I say that, I don't mean just go out and play and don't think about anything else, but am I really making deeply the choices that I think I should? And so that's the kind of thought process we were in. Yet we were really sad. So it was a weird winter for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you lose a friend or family to suicide, you ask a lot more questions than if it was a disease or old age or an accident, because you know why they died. It was a car accident, It's cancer, and it's not. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's something better, because of course it's still a loss of a life and it's hard to deal with, but there's questions of why. Why did they take their own lives? It just kept coming up over and over. And it was almost like my dad had just retired. He worked at General Motors his whole life, and like was proud that he put his time in, and proud to get his pension, and proud to retire. And it was standing on the other side. To me, Dad finally had his whole life in front of him. He'd worked 7 days a week. He took every overtime shift he could get. He drove an hour and a half just to get to work. It's his whole life, and now he's retired. Now he's like finally free. But I guess that wasn't really the case.
And so that winter, with that whole, dark thoughts that we were having, we were finding it very hard to get motivated to get out and have fun and do the things we like. We were really into dark thoughts.
We had ski passes, season's passes to our local hill at Camp Fortune, which was 10-15 minute drive, and we couldn't get ourselves to go.
Yeah. So in that winter, we decided at some point to book a ski trip to BC. We're like, okay, like we're gonna book a vacation and go ski with friends. We had friends in near Kelowna, so we're gonna book a trip and we're gonna go ski Big White and have fun, and it's gonna feel good and all that. And so we went, and like John was gone for 3 weeks. I was gone for only a week because I didn't have enough vacation left, but we still had a blast. And when John came back, after he came back 2 weeks later, I was still home, and he came back and he told me, I don't know, Tracy, I don't know what there is, but during the entire time I was there, during those 3 weeks, like every morning I was happy. I would get up and I would go ski, and I was like, I was myself again, after 6 months of crap, I was finally myself again. What is it, And so I started looking into it and thinking about it in terms of what makes us feel good, and just researching happiness and this entire process, and came across serotonin. and how, being outdoors and being active and having those life habits actually contribute to your mental wellness. And when I told John, John was like, that's it. That's the project. We're not going to talk about suicide and depression and mental illnesses. We're going to talk about happiness, and we're going to talk about, being outdoors and being active and what makes us happy and how it impacts our life and how people make choices to take care of their mental wellness by making those choices. And so that's the conversation we want to have, because for us, I mean, with the exception of that really dark period, we're usually pretty happy-going people, like we like to have fun, and we're not really depressed all that much, but we felt more compelled to tell happy stories than to tell sad stories, even if these happy stories had really low lows, and if these people we were talking about had sad stories, it was still always having a positive outcome or a positive mindset about what was going on.
What brought me to your story originally, it's something that resonates with me as well. I lost a cousin to suicide many years ago. And so that process of reflection and thinking about life in a different way, I recognize when you're saying that very, very much so. And wondering, am I living the life that I want to be living right now? What am I doing? Am I truly happy? What I did this past summer was I did a bike ride across Canada in 2016, and so I was raising funds for mental health awareness, similar to how you've been doing with plans for your book. So I remember that moment of thinking, this is how I'm going to live, at least this segment of my life. I'm going to do this bike trip. When did the light bulb come for you? You've already talked about the serotonin part, but the light bulb of, we're going to buy this van and we're going to drive across North America, meeting people and hearing their stories.
Yeah, I mean, it was
a million pieces of
yeah, in a way I want to say it kind of all like after discovering serotonin, it all kind of fell into place pretty quick, but it also didn't feel like it happened so fast that it was out of control. It kind of felt like everything fell into place at the pace it needed to. As Tracy told me about serotonin, I was like, that's it. We got to do stories about happiness, and share stories on how people get their serotonin. And I guess I went through like a ton of ideas of like, oh, well, we could just do it around the Ottawa Gatineau area. And then it just kind of kept growing into like, well, maybe we could figure out a way to do like stories across Canada somehow.
Because we had decided also, like at the same time, we were like, oh, we're probably not interested ourselves in staying in the Ottawa area. So we're like, we'd like to move, and maybe we'd like to check out, the West Coast, because that's where there's more of the activities that we enjoy doing. So we're like, well, if we're going to move to the West Coast, might as well, go and do a road trip, and then might as well collect stories as we drive across the country.
Yeah, and I mean, at first it was like, it'll just be a summer thing. And then as we started planning and thinking about it more, I think we saw more potential in what we were doing. And so it kind of started to take its form over the course of that winter and spring into what it is now. So I ended up buying the van and spending 10 months working on it. When you buy a 25-year-old van, there's a lot of work to be done. So my buddy in Ottawa owns a little shop, and so I went there, and he was nice enough to let me use one of his bays for originally a couple weeks. Is what we thought it would take us to do all the work we needed to do, and 10 months later we rolled the van out of his shop. So, and I mean, that whole time there was a lot of project planning going on, a lot of details and logistics, as well as getting our crowdfunding campaign going to help fund the project, because it was going to be expensive.
Yeah, work and put money aside, because it's mostly or in great part self-funded. So it's like it took almost from the moment we decided to do searching for Sero and do like a 2-year road trip and drive across North America. It took a year for us to be able to hit the road with a van running and a project and a bit of money in the bank and get going.
Tracy, what was it like for you to have that golden ticket, like you said, and to enter the uncertainty of kissing that goodbye and going on this?
It was funny because at first my goal wasn't to quit. I had this idea of taking a leave of absence, doing the project, and then, throughout deciding if I want to come back or if I want to go back to something else, or, having that option, because I did have it. And over that, as I said, like, it took us a year to plan. So over that year of planning, the closer we got to getting ready to leave, the clearer it was in my mind that I was not going to want to go back to that. And so a few months before leaving, maybe 3-4 months before leaving, I told John, I'm like, I'm not going to go back. Like, I don't want to. And I felt like I would commit to the project and to my new life in a different way if I knew I had nothing to fall back on, and if I knew I wasn't this life anymore, like it was
Right.
something new and I was just looking forward, and that was it. And so that was, I guess, a choice I made just a few months before leaving, to just let go of that past life and go on with this.
So take me to the start date when you set off from Newfoundland and you start this incredible experience.
Yeah, I mean, it started spring 2016.
May 20th.
Yeah, May, right after my birthday.
Yeah.
From Ottawa, we started to head east. So there was, of course, the emotional goodbyes with family and all the hugs and all the wishes. We actually had a big send-off party in Ottawa with all our friends as well, which was super fun. And then we headed east to Newfoundland, and we had done kind of 8 preview stories in the Ottawa area, but there was a bit of anxiousness about the first story from the road. The stories in Ottawa were easy in a way because we had our friends there, we had our contacts there, we knew people with interesting and motivational stories, but all of a sudden we're in Newfoundland where neither of us had ever been before. We didn't know anybody there, and it was kind of like, how are we going to find a story? Who are we going to interview? Like, we should have thought this out before. And we ended up having a few people on social media that had started following us that live in Newfoundland. And so we met up with them and chatted, and they introduced us to a few people in the community. And we ended up finding our first story, which is still actually one of the kind of more impactful stories that we've written so far.
We've had a lot of stories. I think it was a snowball effect after that. We were able, we knew what to do to get to people, to get to those stories. And it was that first, breaking the ice and not doubting that our ideas would make any sense. We're like, this is a ridiculous idea. You roll into town and you randomly look for people you don't know, and hopefully they want to talk to you, and hopefully they want you to take photos and write their life down on paper. Yeah, that's gonna work, right? But we've been lucky. The people we've met and their openness and their willingness to share personal moments of their lives with us and with our audience have been we're really grateful. It's been touching. It's been amazing. We're really lucky.
Yeah, the variety of stories we have now. We have over 60 stories at the moment, and everybody's is so unique. And everybody we talk to motivates us in their own unique way. We'll be talking to them, and there's definitely things that I'll latch onto that are different than what Tracy latches onto about this particular person's story, but we both get motivated by it. And I think that's what we hope the readers do when they read each story is, there might be some things that you don't resonate with, or maybe you didn't go through that kind of thing in your life, so it doesn't really hit you the same way. But, there are parts where it's like, oh yeah, I had a job I hated, or, oh yeah, I did go through a bit of a tough time with my parents, and it's good to know that I'm not the only one, I'm not alone, and that there's an out on the other side if we work through this and we keep our minds focused, and we, make time for ourselves to get outside and play.
So what was that first story that you got in Newfoundland, and maybe some other stories that you find have stuck with you in the weeks past?
Yep. That first story was the story of a lady, Andrea, that has suffered from depression and anxiety in her life. She was overweight and had like major self-esteem issues that were related in part to her weight, but not really only that. And that's something she discovered along her process of, she got to a turning point where she was so down that she wanted to end her life herself. And she says the only reason she didn't do it, she had two children at the time. And so
still has two children.
She still does. And basically that was a turning point for her to start try to lose weight and feel better about herself. And she did. I think over the first year she lost close to 100 pounds or something like that. And so it had a major impact on her and transformed her life and made it better in a way. But a few years later, she realized that she was still running and biking and doing all those things and being an advocate for a healthy lifestyle. She was still feeling deep within inside her, she hated herself, and she was still suicidal. And again, she had to realize that the weight was not what made her hate herself. It was just a symptom of her self-esteem issues. And so she went through another phase of basically therapy and understanding and loving and caring for herself to be able to get over that. And now she's good. She's doing really well. She was doing really well when we met her last year, and we're still in touch with her, and she's doing great.
Yeah, it's interesting because she talked a lot about how she always gave everything for other people, for her kids, for her husband, for her work. It was always give, and she never focused on giving to herself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that moment that was a turnaround for her when she said in the interview, I realized that I didn't have anything else to give until I gave to myself. And she debated with herself about how that was going to be selfish, about this and that. I think there's a lot of people that get into that, especially mothers or parents, giving everything to their kids and not taking that time for themselves to make sure that they're healthy. So it was a pretty, inspiring and motivational story. And I think a lot of people read it and could feel and see themselves or people they know that have been in very similar situations.
And other stories that have been interesting, I'd say what's really interesting, especially now that we look back, as John said earlier, is the variety of them. So Andrea was a mother. She had, weight issues and self-esteem, but we've also, interviewed people that had severe mental illness diagnosed and had to work through that. We interviewed people that never really had that, but went through periods in their life, whether it's related to a divorce, work-related issues.
Even lately, being in the U.S., a lot of the people we've talked to are kind of like, I became unhappy because I was chasing the American dream.
Yeah.
And we can pick on the Americans being Canadian, but we're very much parallel to it. Of society telling us to go to school and to get a job and to save money. And our most recent story that we posted this morning on Josh, that was exactly it. And he, talks about buying and owning this high tech company, and his wife was a doctor. They were living in Athens, Georgia, in a mansion, had everything that the American dream told them to have.
Right.
and they still weren't happy, you know.
They were
And
both miserable.
yeah, and they ended up downsizing, moving to a little adventure town, Asheville, North Carolina, so they could ride mountain bikes more often. And Josh ended up getting out of high tech and starting a little outdoor apparel company called Weevil, with the whole basis, or his slogan being "Get off the couch and get outside," which naturally attracted us to him. Well, why? Why did you want to get off the couch and get outside?
Right.
And that's when he told us that background story about the American dream. And we've definitely heard a lot of that lately. So it's, you know, that I think that's the cool part about the projects is it's been everything from people suffering from deep and difficult mental health issues to just people kind of chasing what society tells us to chase and realizing that they're not happy. You know, they were never diagnosed, they never had, you know, a chronic illness, but they did sense, you know, this isn't how I want to live my life.
Right. These stories, how have they changed your attitudes, your thoughts on, you know, the way that you live your life, the way that you approach life, the way that you see the world?
I think it's funny because meeting all these people with whom in a way we have a lot in common make us at the same time feel really hopeful about society, because we meet all these people that have come to the realization that happiness is within reach, and they're taking the steps to make it happen, and they're doing cool things either in their community. A lot of them are very community engaged, or with their families, with their kids, you know, like, so it feels to us like there's amazing things happening and amazing people, and at the same time we're, I guess, seeing a lot of disconnection from other people around us, and where we travel, and, you know, poverty and difficult times. And so it's kind of an interesting contrast for us to look at, but at the same time I'm really hopeful that, you know, we can have good conversation about mental health and how we can work towards getting better. I think a lot of people are more and more aware and more willing to discuss mental illnesses and prevention. So I think I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I think that's what I am.
I mean, I think that one of the biggest things I've noticed to talking to all these people is, as soon as you approach it as mental wellness, there's a bigger willingness for anybody to open up.
Right.
As soon as we say mental health, people kind of close down. It's like, yeah, it's, you know, it's not really me. And you can say, you know, like, you know, one in 4 people are susceptible to a mental health issue at some point in their life, you know, and it still doesn't really open that up.
Right.
But you start talking about it as mental wellness, and that we all have to look after our mental wellness. And then all of a sudden everyone can kind of understand a bit better, and willingness to open up and talk about it. And the fact that, yeah, I wasn't, you know, ever to the point where I felt like I was clinically depressed, but I had these lows in my life. And that, opening that conversation up has been huge, you know, because as soon as you're okay with talking about some of those lows, you know, it opens up everyone to talking about their low, which is different for everyone. And it's been pretty cool to see that. And I think that's, you know, the biggest thing I've taken from it is that it's okay to talk about those lows, you know, especially if we back it up with, you know, why we got down there and how we can get out of it. You know, and that conversation doesn't happen the same way if it's, you know, mental illness. So, because it's still, you know, there's been some great work around like ending the stigma and opening up that conversation, but I think people are just so hesitant to talk about mental illness.
Right. Yeah, it's still a language thing, right? It's you realize the power of words and what people associate with those words.
Yeah. I mean, it's just easier to understand mental wellness for most people, I think, unless you've been in those deep times and have come out the other side, and those people are so strong with what they talk about and how they talk about their lives and what happened to them. But I think it's difficult for, the bigger general public to understand that sometimes.
I think what's different is, if we talk about physical health, we can easily say, I'm doing this because it's healthy, it's for my health. We can talk about health left and right. No matter who you are, you can have that discussion, but not so much on the mental health side. And so usually when you say mental health, people hear mental illness. And so we can't really have that general conversation because people say, well, I haven't been diagnosed as having a depression or bipolar or anxiety disorder or and so on and so forth. Therefore, I don't have any grounds to discuss mental health. But that's not true. Mental health is everything in between the perfect state of mental health and the worst, mental illness. Everything in between is your mental health. So it's that whole array of situation and feelings and everything, but that's not what we see and think of. So I think it's as you said, the power of word and what perception is associated with which words, and we have to unfortunately think of that when we have this conversation, because otherwise people close up and it's not happening.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you talk about it as mental wellness. The conversation of prevention is all of a sudden a lot easier. We know that we shouldn't eat at McDonald's because it'll put our cholesterol through the roof, and for a lot of those things, there's, for a lot of illnesses, there's a big focus on prevention. But at what point have we ever talked about mental illness prevention? Especially knowing the stats of 1 in 4, 1 in 4 Canadians, and we never talk about mental health or mental illness prevention. I think that's one of the things, calling it mental wellness or discussing mental wellness, we all can start to open up that conversation about prevention a lot easier.
Right. So if we're all talking about the same thing, whatever label you choose, you want to try and choose the language that's going to allow the most amount of people to participate in the conversation and feel like they can be part of the conversation, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
What has this taught you, or how has this changed the way you think about happiness and what happiness means?
I think for me, for myself, happiness, it's still an elusive concept. It's hard to define, and it means a lot of, different things for different people. And I think 2 years ago, I really wanted to understand it and define it. Not so much anymore. I think my personal focus in my life anyway is more around finding joy and contentment on a regular basis. I think happiness is such like a big idea that we can easily find ourselves chasing for something we don't know what it is and being dissatisfied by that. And so for me, if I can find joy on a daily basis, if I can find gratitude, if I can find these little moments that make me smile on a regular basis and try to push my life in a direction where I have more of that than the opposite, then I think I'm going towards happiness and making my life better. And I think those moments and those joys will be different for everyone, and that's okay. Like for me, some sports bring me a lot of joy. My friends, my family, people I love bring me a lot of joy most of the time. Nature, like looking at flowers and birds and butterflies and, spotting a little, I don't know, like a fish doing something funny in the water. Like, I don't know, it brings me joy for absolutely no reason. And so I'm going to try to find these things, and it's going to contribute to my overall happiness. And that's what I'm looking for.
And you, John?
I mean, I guess it's kind of similar. It's, for me, it's just don't let people tell you what to do to be happy. which I guess is interesting because it's kind of what we're doing, but we always end up with like it doesn't have to be sports. It can be gardening, it can be sewing, it can be music, art, like you need to go into that soul search yourself and find what does make you happy, what brings you joy, what brings you contentment. And it is totally different for everyone else. But I think so often we get told that, this shiny new car is going to bring you happiness, or the brand new cell phone, or this or that. And it's like, nobody can tell you what brings happiness. That needs to come from inside. That needs to come from you and in your soul search. And it might not be easy. It might not be clear, and it may take doing a few things you didn't enjoy. For me, that's dancing. I was like, yeah, dancing makes me so happy, and I'm going to try, but I don't come out smiling after dancing. Well, sometimes I come out laughing at myself.
Everyone else is smiling, though.
There you go. Yeah.
And, I guess that's what I learned. Just don't, there is no one thing. You can't buy it. You can't be told what is happiness. You need to go find it. And, for us, it's definitely outdoor adventure. And I think that's why our project focuses on it. I don't want to take things away from the arts, from music, from gardening, but, in a way, it doesn't bring me the same kind of happiness as riding my bike down the side of a mountain does.
Okay, this is a bit more of a tough question because I'm going to bring you out of the present and force you to think ahead. But as this trip, you do have at this point a finish line in mind of 2018. What comes when the van finally gets parked? And I know there's a book in the works, but what are the plans post searching for Sero in this sort of chapter that you're in right now?
I think the last month we've talked about this every day while driving.
Yeah. We're just starting to picture ourselves in our life after, and we're trying to put the pieces together. We don't know, we're still thinking this through, both in terms of where we want to end up.
If we want to end up somewhere.
If we still, want to remain somewhat nomadic, because that's one thing we haven't mentioned, but as we're traveling around, we're meeting a lot of people that live this lifestyle and that have done it for years. So it is a possibility. So to answer and not answer your question, we don't know really. But we are starting to think about that because we're seeing the end, I guess, or at least the end of the project. As you were saying, spring 2018 is our end of travel date. After that, we're going to prepare the book. So whether we're going to prepare that book from the road or from a place we choose still is left to be determined.
Yeah, there's so many options. There's kind of continue the project. We can do another lap around Canada and North America. Because we keep meeting more people and we keep hearing
places we haven't visited yet.
And super interesting stories. It's so hard to know what to do after, where to go. We're kind of free at the moment and can go anywhere. And
it's kind of weird because normally in life you probably don't feel that free to do anything. It's like it feels like a new beginning and all roads are possible. We don't have financial, material, physical attachments to anywhere, with the exception of the people we know. But because we've been far for almost 2 years now, it's not like it's something we need to go back to. We don't have work commitments that are not flexible. So it's almost too free to be able to make a decision.
We'll still be mountain biking. We'll still be surfing. We'll still be skiing. We're definitely going to be doing what we love.
We just don't know where.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's about as good an answer as I can ask for.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll end it with this one. And in honor of being 2 Canadians in the States right now, we just had Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving. What are the things that you're thankful for, that you find yourself thankful for?
Okay, as a little bit of a joke, but not a joke, we saw this morning in a little cartoon about Thanksgiving, and it had, it was two people walking with their bag of groceries and their turkey poking out. So again, in the Thanksgiving theme, and they were walking beside this like news outlet everywhere, and they were saying, "I'm thankful for being Canadian." Definitely feeling lately that we're thankful for being Canadian.
You said that with a big French accent.
Well, you will know, my friend, that there's like over 8 million French Canadian in your country. Yeah, so we're thankful for that. I'm thankful for being able to do this. This is amazing. We haven't really talked to you about the difficulties. There are certainly like hard days, living on the road, not knowing where we're going to sleep next sometimes is an issue. Having a 25-year-old vehicle that's not always reliable is an issue. We've had a few mechanical issues, especially lately, that have been stressful. Financially, sometimes it's a struggle too, because it's a different kind of work environment. It's not, it's not easy to make regular money. So sometimes you come up short and you're stressed about money. So it's not always easy, but I'm thankful for being able to do it and to feel that I can connect with all these people and feel like I'm part of a bigger community. It's been amazing.
Yeah. I'm thankful for all our readers, and for all the people that reach out, like yourself, and want to talk more, or just want to thank us for what we do, or tell us that they were inspired. Those emails and messages and comments keep us motivated, and I guess it feels good to get them, because you're like, yes, like
someone's reading.
Somebody read what we wrote. One person read it.
Yeah.
And that's, that the people that are following us, I think is what I'm most thankful for, because if no one was receiving what we were creating, there wouldn't be a point to doing it. And I think from the emails we get, that people are reading it and people are being inspired by it. And yeah, I'm thankful for all those people.
Well, I'm thankful for you too and for your time. I appreciate it. It's an inspiring story, and I can't wait to keep on following as these months continue for you.
Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for the show. Thanks for listening, and I hope you liked it. If you want to read more about John and Tracy, head over to searchingforsero.com. They're worth a follow on Twitter and Instagram too, @searchingforsero. It's how I got to know about Amy Tunstall, one of the earlier guests on this show. If you enjoyed the show, there are a couple of things you can do that'll help me out tremendously. One, you can hit subscribe. New episodes every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Player.fm. They're also coming to YouTube slowly but surely. Worth checking out there. You can also leave a rating and a review. That helps more people discover the show when they're looking through iTunes or whatever platform you listen through. Another thing you can do, share the love. Pass it on to someone else you think might enjoy the show. Let's make this family a bit bigger. There's always room for more. Theme music for the show is by Dr. Turtle off the album You I'll Ah. Next week on the show, I talk to an inspiring individual and one of the people I've looked up to for a long time, in Sean Stevenson. Once again, I'm Martin Bauman, and this was A Story Untold. See you next time.